Full compliance was mandatory. The judge reminded Patel and everyone in the room that the law applied equally, regardless of political power, and executive authority could not override a constitutional court order. Inside the FBI, the stakes were enormous. The director was facing the potential of arrest and detention, an event that could paralyze the agency. Congress was watching closely. Democrats praised the judge's bold enforcement of the law. Republicans were split. Some defended Patel's claims of national security concerns, while others acknowledged that defying court orders was unacceptable. The political and institutional implications were enormous. If Patel released the documents, it could expose Trump's connections to Epstein, potentially creating a political firestorm. If Patel refused and was arrested, it would create the first ever crisis of its kind for the FBI and send shockwaves across the executive branch. The documents themselves were highly sensitive. They reportedly included FBI investigative files showing Trump's social connections to Epstein, witness statements confirming Trump's presence at Epstein's properties, and internal FBI communications that revealed political pressure to prevent the investigation from advancing against Trump. Patel had blocked the release of documents that showed FBI agents recommended criminal investigation of Trump, but those recommendations were ignored due to political influence. The selective release of information suggested that Patel was shielding Trump while allowing investigations against others to continue. The December 19th file release, just one day before Patel's deadline, would likely include additional testimony and flight logs that would make continued withholding impossible to justify. The court emphasized that these materials were already cleared as non-classified and non-privileged, meaning Patel's excuses could no longer hold legal weight. The pressure was intensifying. The countdown to December 20th at 5:01 p.m. became a constitutional timeline. Either Patel would comply or he would be taken into custody. Judge Berman's decision was rooted in the fundamental authority of the judiciary. Courts must have the power to enforce their orders, otherwise the legal system collapses. Criminal contempt exists to prevent officials, even the highest-ranking law enforcement officers, from ignoring court orders. Threatening the FBI director with arrest was rare but legally sound. The alternative, allowing an executive official to defy court orders, would have undermined the separation of powers and the rule of law. Patel's calculations appeared to rely on Trump's potential intervention, either through executive privilege, pardons, or political pressure. However, the judge had made it clear that such maneuvers would not prevent arrest. Executive privilege had been rejected in this context. Pardons do not apply to civil contempt, and judges operate independently from political influence. Patel had no legal escape. The countdown was real. 48 hours until either compliance or incarceration. The broader consequences were staggering. Jailing the FBI director would establish a precedent. No one, regardless of rank or political connection, could defy a court order. This would reinforce judicial authority and send a warning to future officials about obstruction. Conversely, if Patel were allowed to ignore the court, it would signal that executive branch officials could place themselves above the law. Both scenarios had enormous implications for American governance, law enforcement, and public trust. By December 18th, 2 days before the deadline, there was no sign of Patel moving toward compliance. Reports indicated he was hoping for political intervention, but the court had made it clear that intervention would not work. The countdown continued. Legal scholars noted that federal judges almost always enforce contempt orders once issued. The moment Patel refused the deadline, arrest became not just possible but likely. The political fallout, legal ramifications, and institutional crisis were all approaching simultaneously. The tension between judicial authority and executive obstruction reached its peak. The December 20th deadline was the fuse for multiple overlapping crises as legal, political, and institutional. If Patel released the documents, it would expose evidence of Trump's connections to Epstein and reveal the extent of political influence within the FBI. If he failed, he would be jailed, setting a precedent for the limits of executive power and establishing the judiciary's authority to enforce compliance. The nation would watch closely, understanding that either outcome carried high stakes. Even within the FBI, anxiety spread. The idea of the director being jailed was almost unimaginable. The agency's operations could be disrupted, leadership destabilized, and credibility questioned. For Congress, the situation was a test of oversight power and accountability. For the courts, it was a reaffirmation that constitutional authority cannot be ignored, even by those at the top of the law enforcement hierarchy. The legal drama was only part of the story. The content of the withheld documents added a layer of urgency. Witness testimony, flight logs, and internal FBI communications revealed not just Trump's social connections to Epstein, but potential knowledge of criminal activities and the selective suppression of investigations. Patel's obstruction could therefore have real-world consequences for justice, victims, and the integrity of federal law enforcement. The December 19th release of some Epstein files was expected to further pressure Patel. Any delay beyond December 20th would no longer be defensible. The court emphasized that partial compliance would not satisfy the order. Every single document had to be produced. The explicit timeline left no ambiguity. The judge reminded Patel and the audience that defiance had consequences: immediate arrest, detention, and potential disbarment. By the evening of December 18th, the countdown was unmistakable. The nation, the courts, Congress, and the FBI were all watching. Patel's decision in the next 48 hours would either enforce accountability or trigger an unprecedented institutional crisis. The tension was palpable. The documents were powerful, the legal authority clear, and the deadline unavoidable. December 20th at 1 p.m. would be the moment when the law either compelled compliance or demonstrated its limits against executive obstruction. In summary, the situation combined legal enforcement, political pressure, and institutional integrity. The documents Patel withheld were explosive, connecting Trump to Epstein's criminal network. The court, led by Judge Berman, had made clear that refusal to comply would result in immediate arrest. This was a rare confrontation, pitting judicial authority against executive branch defiance. The December 20th deadline created a constitutional countdown, with consequences affecting the FBI, Congress, and public trust in the rule of law. Every delay, every excuse only heightened the stakes. The nation watched, knowing that compliance or incarceration was inevitable, and that the outcome would have far-reaching implications for law, politics, and justice.